It's my understanding, actually, that you know Mike Novogratz personally, and when he comes out swinging with a call like 200K Bitcoin if Trump picks a dove, do you hear that as Mike being Mike, or is that a very real signal the market should be taking seriously right now? What do you think?
Well, it's interesting because when it comes to Mike, and let me tell you kind of how I know him, being in this space and being on, as we used to say, crypto Twitter, right, which is now crypto X. And so him and I had interacted, and he's got a place here in New Orleans, and so got a chance to go to one of his parties, had a great time. And he's a smart guy. Look, Mike's been in the space a long time. He knows it very well. And, he would be a great example of somebody that basically is letting you know, hey, look, this is what's going on. So people like Mike and people like that have so much experience, they're speaking from what they know. They're speaking from what they deal with. And I would just say you're seeing so much bullishness right now. Obviously in the short term, there's a lot going on. We watched the plateau of where Bitcoin and Ethereum have been. But, you see these institutions, right? You see all the big companies coming in and getting into them. They're bullish for a reason. So, yeah, I see what he's saying. I see why he's saying, and I think it's going to do very well.
Yeah, I think so. And he framed the next Fed chair as likely the biggest bull catalyst for Bitcoin going forward. And so from your perspective, Big Dog, how much weight does that seat really carry in shaping the next cycle for Bitcoin?
In my opinion, it shapes a lot. I mean, look, the thing is, when it comes to politics, right, it's interesting because for the longest time in this space, people paid attention to politics, but it really wasn't as much as it's been now. Well, because of the fact of how regulations have been, regulation by enforcement, and the change in the administration, you have to pay more attention to it now. And so when you look at the Fed cutting interest rates and how they offer risk on assets, let's just say, Jay Powell had given us 0.50 basis point cut, right? 0.50 on last time. We could have seen things fly. But I think what you're looking at is, especially if the current administration is able to put in, a new Fed chair, and you wind up seeing rates get cut left and right. A lot of people are thinking, oh, the bull run's coming. It might end of this year. I think you're seeing, this year should be good, but I think 2026 is going to be really good. And if you see the rates get cut like that, you could see risk on assets absolutely go, to the stratosphere.
Yeah, it's definitely looking like we're going to be seeing this unique bull run scenario that we hadn't seen in years past, very much because of these regulatory tailwinds we're seeing, and of course the institutional adoption that's been too big for anyone to ignore this particular cycle. And Big Dog, from your seat at the table, are you getting the sense right now that Bitcoin's trajectory lives and dies on Fed policy decisions, or is that just one part of a bigger story that we're experiencing right now?
No, I think it's one part of the bigger story, because when you look at it right now, and let's just say, obviously you've been in the space a while, a lot of people have been in the space a while. We've watched how Bitcoin has gone up and then retraced or whatnot. Once the institutions came in, who would have thought it would be sitting above 100,000 for such a long time, and people would be getting bored of it. Oh my gosh, just sitting at 100, acting like it was 10,000 back in the day. So, I think we're really in such a different situation now, because you've got the institutions that are buying. They're not going to quite sell like retail did the last time that it crashed. But then the interest rate cuts, where there's not a guarantee, have historically been a catalyst. And if we get, right, if we never know, as we say, no one has a crystal ball. But if we wind up getting several cuts, let's just say we get some more in October, they're talking about, I think there's a high chance of it, high probability. But let's just say next year that the trajectory changes and we get several. That could be an absolute fire, a firestorm, whatever you want to say, right, for risk on assets. Now, beyond 2026, who knows? A lot of people say that we could start going down. We don't know. But I think right now you're seeing such an accumulation from institutions and whatnot that are planning on holding. You add that fuel to the upward fire, and should be a very interesting 2026.
Yeah, all that institutional money we've seen inflow into the space really seems to be providing us a much more sturdy floor than we've seen in past cycles, especially with retail always chasing these high alpha plays. But now you have all this institutional money that seems to be here to stay. So the ecosystem we're experiencing now is fundamentally different than anything we've had previously. And if Novogratz is right, and a dovish Fed pick sends Bitcoin ripping to new all-time highs in the not-too-distant future, Big Dog, what kind of reaction do you think we'll be seeing from, regulators, Wall Street, and even governments that have been skeptical about Bitcoin until now? Do you think we're going to start seeing them pile in even more so if we get some more dovish action from the Fed chair?
Yeah, I mean, and it's not just it's talking about Mike, but it's like everybody. I mean, once you see all the institutions coming in, it's like it's interesting. You look at Fidelity and Morgan Stanley, and they're all coming in. Look, at the end of the day, a lot of these institutions didn't want to touch it before for whatever reason, and you had J.P. Morgan, right, that compared it to tulips and beanie babies and all this kind of stuff, and all of the I say the junk we've heard. At the end of the day, people want to buy it, particularly a lot of younger people. They feel comfortable with it. Then you start putting it possibly in pension funds, whatnot, whatever it's going to be. You're going to see more and more people jump in. They've already said for all the millionaires in America, not every millionaire can even own one Bitcoin. So I just think it's getting so much bigger. I think we all know it's getting so much bigger, but it's like anything. People want to see other companies jump in before they jump in. Then you have other nations jumping in. Look at El Salvador and other ones too. So I mean, it's not, I'll say this. I always thought the $1 million Bitcoin was a crazy, crazy thought. And now it's like, to me, it's not a matter of if, it's simply a matter of when. It's just getting bigger.